Nobody goes from I'm fine to I'm not okay overnight. There's always a progression, a slide, a series of small internal slips that you don't notice until you're already deep in the gap. Most midlife professionals think burnout or mental overwhelm happens suddenly, but it doesn't. It happens quietly, gradually, predictably. And if you know how to spot the triggers early, you can stop the slide before it begins. My name's Andrew, and today I'm going to show you why your mental health can shift so quickly and how to stop yourself from slipping into the emotional gap that so many people fall into without even realizing. I remember many years ago when I was living in England playing professional sport, and I was based in London. And if you've ever been to London, you'll understand the famous underground train network, also known as the Tube. I'll never forget being on the underground and going from station to station and hearing that famous line being played throughout the sound system in the station as each train would arrive, and the announcer would say, "Mind the gap." And the reason why this repeated instruction of mind the gap was always played is because many of those train stations in the underground actually had curved platforms. And so the train wouldn't always align perfectly with the edge of the platform, and the gap between the platform and the train could be quite significant. And I remember years and years later, after moving back to Australia, still occasionally having that replay in my mind of mind the gap. And it stuck with me in such a way that it actually helped me in later years with training professionals about their mental health journey. And I changed this phrase of mind the gap into this idea of mind the triggers. And as I said at the start of this episode, it's so important to understand that one of the big problems with mental health struggle is that it's a misunderstood progression. Nobody goes from being perfectly stable and robust to massively problematic in their mental health overnight. There's always a progression and a journey or a slide that takes place. But I want to give you a very nuanced but very important detail in that slide journey that if you understand how it works, you can pay better attention to it, you can be better prepared for it, and you can do better at avoiding it. You see, the thing is, for most people, there are triggers that actually send them into a mental health slide or increase the velocity of the slide that they're already on. Triggers take all kinds of shapes and sizes and forms. For many people, it's the memory of traumatic events in their life, or it could be the moment of a failed relationship. For lots of us, it's simple things that we already know we're supposed to take care of, like our diet and our sleep and our recreation and our fitness and health. There's all manner of triggers that can actually send you into a mental health slide. Even for some people, not paying attention to their neurochemistry and what's going on in their body hormonally. We've got to understand that triggers are unique to each unique person's story. And if you can learn to identify what your triggers are, disappointments, misguided expectations, certain people and certain relationships, if you can learn by looking back what triggers set you off in the past and therefore what triggers might set you off in the future, you will be better prepared to avoid those moments where you could miss the trigger, slip into the gap, and before you know it, be quite far progressed along the mental health spectrum. Right, so let's get practical for a moment or two. We've identified this idea that there are certain triggers unique to all of us that can actually send us in the wrong direction with our mental health. However, for most of you, you're not quite ready yet to actually be skillful at identifying the triggers before they happen. For most of us, we start to observe that we've had a triggering event just after. And so what I'd like to start with is giving you some practical tips built around warning signs that you may have just passed through a dangerous trigger. If you can learn to pay attention to the warning signs, that will help you to identify that triggers could have been breached, and then you can stop the slide before it causes too much damage. Let's get into some warning signs that are telling you that your mental health could be in jeopardy. The first one is that you're going to notice your willpower is struggling. Now, what I'm talking about there is your ability to engage your willpower for normal, everyday activities. Now, nobody expects you to get super excited about mundane tasks, but when you find yourself really struggling to get yourself up and to engage that willpower by choice for normal, everyday routine, it's a warning sign that depletion is starting to become a problem. Here's a second warning sign. You might need help from others around about you on this particular one: isolation. When you start to withdraw from friendships and relationships, it's likely that you've just triggered something or had a triggering event, and you're now on the other side of that moment and potentially sliding into some dangerous territory. Pay attention to isolation. The third one, which many of you will have experienced before, it's deeply unpleasant, and that is the experience of increasing anxiety. Finding yourself very anxious about things that you wouldn't normally be anxious about. Maybe getting wound up and stirred up and anxious about having to go into a social setting when you wouldn't normally feel that way. Learning to pay attention to unusual increasing anxiety is one of the key ways to note that we could have been through a trigger line somewhere. Let's talk about 3 practical things that all of us can do to make sure that we're watching for our triggers and minding the gap and not slipping into that slide. The first one is to be wise regarding our physiology. Now, when I use the word physiology, I'm talking about our sleep, our exercise, our nutrition. They're the big 3. If you're not paying attention to good quality sleep, some expression of exercise, and at least pretty good nutrition, you won't be prepared for assessing the rest of what's going on in your life. We can't afford to ignore the power and the importance of our physiological needs. The second one is training resources. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that everybody, regardless of your age or experience, we've all got something within our reach that we could access in order to lift our level of strength, lift our level of understanding, and therefore our capacity to cope with these things. While I'm talking about training resources, it's a good opportunity to point out to you that in the show notes below is a link for my most recent, very comprehensive training program that I call True Self Transformation. It's all about helping midlife career individuals like yourself to get unstuck and get growing so that you can experience upgrade and promotion in your life. One of the subjects that I deal with in that course is this one we're dealing with here today in a far more extensive manner, where I break down the idea of soul tank management so that you can become an expert in these things as well. Why don't you click that link when you have a moment? When you do, there's a free lesson preview so you can actually get a taste of the course. Let's go to number 3 here, and this one is super powerful. It's recreation. Now, people have misunderstood the power and the importance of recreation for a long time. People have dismissed it as just hobby and fun and wasting a bit of time until you got to get back to the serious work. Well, actually, the word recreation is like a derivative of the word recreation, which means that there are activities unique to you and available to you that will put emotional resources into your soul, just like you put fuel into the fuel tank of a car. No fuel, no travel. The same is true of your soul. No emotional resources, no ability to cope with what you've got to deal with that day, that week, that month. You've got to give yourself to some high quality recreation if you want to make it on the journey. Look, I hope you've heard something today in this episode around this idea of making sure you mind the triggers, pay attention to the warning signs, and that this helps you in some way on your own journey with staying mentally robust for everything that you've got to deal with. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'll see you in another video real soon.